Witty, thought-provoking, and uplifting, Southern Soul Livestream is a program that you'll invite your friends over to watch every week, where you'll learn about interesting guests and get to share in their fascinating experiences. Tune in each Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to connect with guests from across the generations and to laugh with our eclectic hosts who are as charming as they are talented. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's our host, Calvin.
As I began to talk to friends and family, it hits me that not everybody even knows what advocate for a child even means. So I look forward to introducing this, having the speakers introduce themselves tonight. And while I do that, let's see who can go first. Let's get the ladies unmuted. And if you don't mind, we like here at Soul Thursday, when we do our interview, we start what we call the origin story, the messy middle, and the what's next. I call that the call to action. But let's get started with Maria. Let's fall back. Let's get started with Cheryl, because Cheryl is the connector. She brought us all here together. Cheryl, if you don't mind introducing yourself, letting us know what you do and why it was so important for you to bring this panel together tonight for this topic.
Well, hi, everyone. And I want to thank everyone for showing up to learn about this important topic. And Calvin, as you know, I was hunting you down, right? I was like, after I saw one of your podcasts that I had joined, I was like, no, I got to talk to him. I got to reach out to him. He's got to know about this because this is such an important topic. So when we finally connected, I was so happy. And I brought people that are also known as experts nationally in the work that we do. So I'll start off with myself. My name is Cheryl Poe. I'm the executive director and founder of a company called Advocating for Kids. We are based out of the Virginia Beach, Virginia area. However, we provide services nationally all over the place. And what we do is we help parents, right, unpack the confusion around how to get the appropriate services for their child that has a disability, someone who learns differently, and needs a little bit of extra support in schools. So I really work with the families. I go into the meetings with them. I speak on their behalf. I help them understand the evaluation and the jargon. And I then do my very best to protect them from the racial microaggressions that they experience when they're sitting at a table with 20, 23, 24 white women all talking poorly about their child. I also do workshops and network, and we have a conference that we will be having in August. I'll let you guys know about that. And I do workshops. So that's who I am. That's what I do. I also have 2 children that are neurodivergent, and I refer to myself as a neurodivergent.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Cheryl. We're going to go in alphabetical order. We're going to go Cori, then we're going to do Destiny, and then Maria, I think. Yeah, I got that. So up next is Cori. What's up, Cori? Talk to us. Tell us about you, what you do. And before we keep going, I want to let you know, audience, I got some questions I'm going to talk through, but I know you have some burning questions with you tonight. Type those in the chat. Jay and Katie are going to be watching. They're going to be pooling your questions and making sure that we get a chance to ask the questions. And at the end, we're going to do a little Q&A. But to make sure that your questions get reviewed and get a chance to make it to the Q&A, make sure you type it in the chat. Go ahead, Cori. Let us know who you are.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Cheryl, for getting me on this panel. It's so great to be here with like-minded individuals. But I'm excited in the capacity of tonight's talk. I'm a CEO, so I actually own my own company. It's called iRock Marketable Business Solutions. We're based out of Virginia. And I help small business owners basically with affordable sales, marketing, business fundamental strategies. That's how I was connected with Cheryl and Maria. But through working with them, I have found that I consider myself neurodivergent now. They done woke me up. And so I definitely am a part of that family. But in my free time, I also homeschool 2 kiddos. So I'm a homeschool educator, along with I teach at 2 local homeschool co-ops. So I've had the privilege to see so many amazing kids with so many different neurodiversities as I've been able to kind of navigate the world of homeschool. And I guess part of my origin story is both of my kiddos were in public school. They started there. We weren't lifelong homeschoolers, But through going through the IEP process, and I was that parent that cried every single session as those people told me that my kid should be in a class where, no other kids talked, and I knew that he was smart and I knew that he had potential, and hearing, oh, well, we'll just keep passing the kids on. And I was like, no, they need to understand this information. They need these skills. They need to be tested. And I didn't know my rights. I didn't know so much information. And because of that, I then chose to homeschool. And I love homeschooling. And I think that it's a great privilege to be able to homeschool if that's right for your family. So I'm excited to be here.
Love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Cori. Up next, Destiny. Destiny, how you doing? Tell us about you.
I'm good. How are you? I just had to take a deep breath. There's so many wonderful women in this room. And that's my first time really hearing Cori's story. I'm very familiar with Maria and Cheryl, and they're familiar with me. And they've kind of really brought me into this space with a lot of different people and gave me a lot of opportunities. So I'm very grateful for that. So I'm Destiny Huff, and I'm late diagnosed autistic and ADHD. I have 2 neurodivergent children, and my husband is ADHD. And this came about when my oldest son entered into the public school system undiagnosed, and trying to get support and help for him, and not receiving that, having to get an advocate, having to get an outside Black clinical psychologist and Black educational psychologist who formally diagnosed him. And then me going on that journey myself and being told like, oh, you've been accommodating your whole life. So that's how you manage to kind of slide under the radar. So I also own 2 businesses. So Destiny Huff Consulting, that is my advocacy business. I help neurodivergent students and their parents advocate for them at the IEP table. I really focus on neuro-affirming practices. So making sure there's an understanding of the fact that they are autistic or ADHD or whatever their neurodiversity is. And, not forcing eye contact and things like that. And really understanding how to work with them and support them from that level. And then I also own HRG Counseling and Supervision LLC. So I'm a licensed mental health professional, and I'm a certified trauma therapist for children. And so on the one hand, my practice that I run for mental health, I do therapy with children, adolescents, and adults. And then on the other hand, I do advocacy work in special education. And I also provide PD, so professional development for schools and organizations. I just did one for foster parents on IEPs and how to advocate for children in special education.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it. And please drop in the chat your contact information, your website. This is all about networking and connecting. Here tonight, I'm excited. And up next, we're going to do Maria, but I'm excited because we have an opportunity to hear from a holistic panel. I know when Cheryl and I sat down, it took us a year, y'all, and that's another story. But when we sat down, we began to talk about, hey, there's so many experts in the field. How can we pull together a panel where we can hear from different perspectives of this journey? And Cheryl has done a great job of helping us get there. Up next, Autism in Black. Maria, tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre. I am also a licensed mental health counselor by trade, but I am the CEO and founder of Autism in Black. And with my company, we educate, support, and empower Black parents raising Black autistic children. And we also train organizations, educators, anybody who works with the Black disability community on how to do less harm to the Black disability community. I myself am autistic and ADHD. I have 3 beautiful children, and they're all neurodivergent as well. My company came about with my oldest, who is now 11, but at 18 months, me and my husband were going through all of the hoops to try to get her autism diagnosis. Having a clinical background, I myself knew that she was autistic. My husband is actually a physician. He is an internist. So we were actually in the rooms with our colleagues advocating on behalf of our daughter, and nobody was listening to us. And it was because of our race, quite frankly. And it led me to actually having to sit in my daughter's pediatric neurologist's office for a week boycotting so he would give her the diagnosis paperwork. And I knew at that point, if it was difficult for me with the privilege of education and finances, then how would it be for those in my community who didn't have the privileges that I have? So that was the birth of Autism in Black. And from there, we have our conference, which is happening April 19th through the 21st. It's our 4th annual virtual conference. So if you're interested, the link will be in the chat. We also have a podcast, Autism in Black podcast. We do webinars, workshops, trainings, and you can find out more about me on my website.
Awesome. Well, what I'm going to do is jump right in, but I want to start with some foundation, right? We're using a lot of terminology, and I'm a fan of terminology. I'm an engineer, so I can literally speak a different language and be speaking English, right? Let's define some terms, right? So we got IEPs, 504, autism, ADHD, neurodivergent. Let's take a stab. Can we define those terms so that the audience know what those terms are? And anybody from our panel could go ahead and pick one and pass to the next. Let's get Cheryl unmuted. I'm get you guys unmuted.
I'll start with IEP. An IEP stands for an individual education plan or program, and it is a requirement under federal law. I'm going to use another acronym. It's IDEA, which stands for the Individuals with Education Disabilities Act. That's the federal act and money that comes to the states, that comes to the districts that they use. And the IEP is the program for the student with the disability to ensure that you're addressing the needs, helping them make progress on the general curriculum, ensuring that they have all the supports, resources, and possible related services to be successful. And to be in a educational setting with their non-disabled peers as much as possible.
Thank you. How about neurodiversity, ADHD, and autism? Who can, baseline that for us?
I'll give that one a shot. Neurodiversity, or it's basically we all have that. All of our brains think differently, every single person. Funnel it down a little bit to neurodivergent. That's when we get into talking about specific diagnosis. For the purposes of this chat, we're talking autism, ADHD, but it is an umbrella term for many other diagnoses as well. So that's just your baseline foundational, make it easy for everybody.
Awesome. I think I got all the terms. Did I miss one?
Oh, and autism. Autism is a developmental delay, a neurodivergence, a neurodevelopmental delay. It's a DSM, which is the clinical book that Destiny and I use to diagnose individuals or other healthcare professionals. So it's in that book of diagnosis, and your child can be autistic. It is no longer pervasive developmental disorder, no longer Asperger's. It is now just autism spectrum disorder, and you can fall anywhere on that spectrum.
Awesome. I'm going to shoot the first question to Destiny because she said something in her intro that really, really comes up a lot with me and my friends. Destiny says, hey, you've been, what did you say, covering it up, or what is that term you use?
Oh, accommodating.
Accommodating. You said you've been accommodating your whole life. I was talking with a friend about people who were diagnosed in the 80s, and hey, all of a sudden, it seems like mental health is a cool topic per se. What does it mean to, be accommodating your whole life? And how do you believe things have changed over the years to where we are now, where people openly talk about mental health and special needs?
So I know one of the biggest conversations I always have is that every generation is very different, right? And I always talk about how, I am a millennial. A lot of my friends are millennial or Gen X. And so as you're going back through the different generations, there becomes a point where certain things are okay. So, it used to be, the dad works, the mom stays home. That's all that's how that dynamic works. And as time went on, okay, mom can work. Then as time went on, okay, dad can spend time with the kids. Then as time went on, we can all spend time with the kids. So it's always adjusting. And so, and part of that, when we talk about that accommodating piece, we grew up where, and I know at least when I was growing up, I don't even remember hearing about IEPs. I don't remember classmates having IEPs or 504s. I really don't even remember special education, so to speak. Like, I remember that sometimes there were students that had a teacher and maybe they weren't in my class, but that's about as much as I can remember going back to my childhood of what I saw. And that's because they used to be very sectioned off. And as IDEA, like Cheryl talks about, as it progressed, right, we saw all of these things change and they were like, hey, let's stop segregating them. Let's start introducing them into the general education classrooms. And so part of that accommodation is, for example, I still need pen to paper. So I get a lot of electronic stuff. I print it out. Preparing for tonight, I have a paper in front of me right now. I am a print person. I am a write person. I'm a highlight and code person. And so my son is what a lot of people would consider level 1 high functioning. He is verbal, he can communicate, he can speak. And I don't personally use functioning labels. But when people think of it, they're always quick to say, oh, he's autistic. Like, really? You're autistic? Really? And so that's how he essentially flew under the radar, and so did I. But the first time we met with this psychologist, and she's familiar, and this is her area, and this is what she does, she immediately was like, hey, Mom and Dad, that was nice talking to him. So have you guys thought about autism? And so it immediately opened our eyes, because our first thought was like, well, he's like Destiny. So like, my husband said that. And we were like, yeah, so what are you trying, like, what does that mean? So, because we were still learning about it and what it looks like. And so when I went to get my testing done, the first thing the psychologist said is like, yeah, you've been accommodating your whole life. You've adjusted where you saw there was a deficit, because I love learning. Right. Like, you made the adjustment. Your parents helped make the adjustment. So that accommodating piece, I think, is something we've always done. And I think only in the past several years where we've had, figures like Twitch from the Ellen Show, who, sadly committed suicide. We've had situations like that really opened the Black community's eyes. You've had individuals like Maria with Autism in Black that are coming out and saying, hey, look, I'm a CEO and I'm autistic. It gives a different perspective on autism and mental health and how to approach it. And so I think as times change and we have conversations like this, that's how we're really opening that door.
I love it. I love it. Times have changed to where now we can be open and talk about it. Someone I identify as neurodivergent, and one thing I've discovered is when it comes to accommodating, I always tell people if something requires 3 attempts, I give myself 5 to 7 attempts. And that's a good example of how I had been accommodating. And I thought, hey, I just needed 7 attempts, but I had no idea there was a name for the thing that required me to do 7 attempts. In engineering school, I knew that I could study 12 hours or 24 hours in a whole week. And my buddy studied for 6 hours and he would still score better than me. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I knew he wasn't necessarily smarter than me, but that is a great example of accommodating throughout life. But now we can talk about it. Let's go to Cheryl. And Cheryl, let's talk about IEPs and 504s. Can you tell us, how IEPs and 504 plans address or do not address the unique needs of Black neurodivergent students?
That's kind of a loaded question, right? Because it depends who's writing that IEP as to whether or not that IEP is going to be developed to take in consideration, right, of the needs of the culture of the child. So it really depends who's writing it in, and that becomes an issue. So the IEP process and the 504 process are separate issues, right? They're 2 different laws. So I'm going to focus on the IEP, which falls under, again, the IDEA, the special education. And one of the things that is so important about the IEP, it's a roadmap, right? In that IEP, that's where we discuss the child's rich gifts. We collect data. We ask for comprehensive evaluation so we can learn what their strengths are along with what their weaknesses are. We then put that information together, right, in something that's called a present level of performance, of function and achievement. Some people call it PLOP, some people call it PLEF, but it's that first part of the IEP, that individualized piece, because it really is for documenting, right, how your child is performing academically. What are your child's strengths? What can they do? How do we build on those strengths to address the weaknesses? But then it also must have a section that explains how the child's neurodivergence, or how the child's brain that thinks differently, is impeding them, right? How is that getting in the way of them to be able to perform as though if they did not have a neurodivergence? And you have to be honest about that. And in our community, at least when I'm working with Black families, I'm often concerned with some of the language that they choose to use in describing, I think, behaviors about young Black boys that are energetic, Black boys that may be ADHD and have a little more energy. Make sure that the language is neuro-affirming, kind of like Destiny talked about. Make sure that even though your child might not be able to sit in his seat often, that the school isn't writing information like your child is defiant, or your child is oppositional, or your child doesn't cooperate, because that hurts. That's not positive language. We need to make sure that in those IEPs, we're describing what the child needs in a way that helps the child and that is positive. And then after we have that present level of performance, where we look at the strengths and we look at the weaknesses, there's a few other sections in there where they talk about assistive technology. Is that something that the team talked about? Can the support of technology, whether it be a program, right, that can read to your child, so when they're in a class, say science, and they're not learning aspects of reading and they're not on grade level, they can still hear it, comprehend it, and then perform for you. And the reading doesn't get in the way. That's just one example of assistive technology, and making sure that we're looking at different tools to help our children. After that section, and this is a part a lot of people know about, are the IEP goals, right? Goals and objectives. Y'all have heard about them. Can I get a yes if you heard about that IEP goal? So the goal is where you are creating a specific, yes, right? The IEP goal. It's you want to look at the specific skill set, the skill set that your child can't perform, that's holding them back from learning. Let's say a child's dyslexic. One of the skill sets they may not be able to perform is recognizing the sounds associated in the letters in a word to be able to blend them and read. So that IEP goal should address that deficit, so that once the child has learned that skill, they will be able to blend the words to read. So that's an example of what your IEP goals can look like. And then sometimes you have objectives. The IEP then has another section to it, right? It's called the accommodations, kind of like Destiny talked about. So accommodations are, how do I accommodate this child's learning needs so that I can still evaluate, assess, and allow them to access that general education curriculum? Right? So maybe the child should have a modification of, instead of having to complete 10 or 20 math assignments on a sheet, that we modified that they only have to do 5, enough to show mastery of the skill. Because a lot of times that classwork that teachers give them is busy work. They don't really need it, right, to learn it. So modifying and accommodating the child is giving them enough of the chunk of the information so that you can still see what their knowledge base is. And then another piece of the IEP is then your placement. Where does your child get services? And this is something I want everybody, I hope if nothing else here, remember, special education is not a location. It is not a classroom. It's a service. So you can get your special education services done for your child in a general education classroom with a general education teacher. Now, they may have to add another special education teacher in there to get those hours of when they're working on goals, but there's nothing that should prevent your child from going into a general education classroom if they have the skill to do it, if they have the ability to do it, right? That should always be your goal, push into a general education classroom. Now, let's be honest, there are some kids that may need more support. And then we have a self-contained class, and that's where they're just with peers that also have similar kinds of disabilities. But, that is appropriate for students that need that more intensity. The goal is always, though, to get your child in the general education setting if you can.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Special
yeah,
education.
and there's a couple other pieces to it, but those are some of that's the meat. I mean, it's a huge form, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're 23, 24 pages. And I'm going to do a shameless plug for Maria because she didn't do it. You guys, not only is she doing the conference, she's one of the first people that offered a conference for Black autistic people. So it's kind of historic. And then all of us also are her presenters. So just, it's a big deal. So
I love it. I love it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Cori, then we're going to go to Maria. So and tell you what the question is going to be. So we're going to go to Cori and we want to talk about homeschooling, right? Neurodivergent learners. And we can start with Cori there, anyone who want to add to that. And then what we're going to do is go to Maria and talk about what does culturally competent autism advocacy look like, right? What does that even mean? So let's go to Cori first. Let's tell us about homeschooling and, neurodivergent learners. What has been your experience? Tell us about homeschooling.
So I think one thing I want to mention about homeschooling, because I think when people think about homeschooling, they think about the weird kids. I want you guys to change your mindset on that. Homeschooling has come such a long way. And one thing that I have seen, I've been homeschooling now close to a decade, is that there are a lot of people who look just like us who are choosing to homeschool because they are finding that they are able to support their kids, be more hands-on with their kids, especially kids that have learning differences or show up differently than the box that sometimes public school puts us in. Like I said in my intro, I have two kiddos that I homeschool, who I've been homeschooling for that close to a decade. My son, we took him out in first grade. He was a child that they tried to put in one of those classes where it was just kids who needed a lot of support. And while I think like Cheryl said, some kids need that, he was not that child. My son, when he went into preschool, had actually already been able to read. He could write. He knew about so many amazing science concepts. He was a very gifted student. He just had some behavioral challenges. And they were basically sending him home. Me and Cheryl had conversations about that. They were sending him home, suspending him as a very young kid. And I, as a parent, a first-time parent, didn't know any better. So I was coming up to the school like, okay, I'll take him home. Then I was like, can I sit in the class? And it was just so stressful. But on the other side of that, I had this one gifted child. On the other side of that, I had a young cousin that my family adopted who was very delayed. She's diagnosed with ADHD. And my son is diagnosed with now severe anxiety. And we're actually testing him again for autism because I think that some things might have been missed early on when they tested him. But the other child, they were very much like, we're just going to pass her on. And her confidence shifted so much. She didn't like school. She felt like she was stupid because when all your peers are able to do the classwork, eventually children are aware and they're like, okay, well, I must be dumb because I don't know how to do this. I can never answer questions. And so we as a family decided to pull them out. Now, I'm never going to tell people that everyone should homeschool. However, I have been noticing that there are just so many resources out there where we can give undivided attention. We don't call them IEPs in homeschool, but they are. Basically, we are individualizing our children's ability to grow. We're able to focus on things that they need and offer them more support. So my son, now he's 12. He's about to go into high school next year. Again, he's a gifted student, but we spend a lot of time working on his social skills. We spend a lot of time working on strategies to help him regulate his emotions. We had time to take him to therapy, have therapy come into the house, work with other amazing resources to support him. The other kiddo now is reading at grade level. She doesn't need a lot of additional support. She's still in therapy. I'm not saying that they come out and homeschool magically fixes them because I don't think it's a fixed type of thing, but we are able to provide them some hands-on, one-on-one attention. And sometimes that is a really great help to those kids. We also have things like co-ops. I mentioned earlier, I teach at co-ops. And it's so interesting because I can have a class that have kids with dyslexia, have kids who have autism, so many different things. And we're able to not have to rush through. We're not doing anything for a test. We are able to say, okay, this child needs these supports. This child needs that support. And believe it or not, we have a lot of homeschool moms who have careers as therapists, have careers as doctors. And so we're not just out here winging it. We bring in experts too. I think that's the biggest thing I want to say. We bring in experts to support us just in a homeschool setting. So I think, again, if it's something you may need for your family and you can make it work, I do think that it's nothing wrong with going into the homeschool space, because there's just so much more. I look back and think, if I would have left my son in public school, knowing only what I knew, this is before I got connected with Cheryl and Maria, they're game changers. And I'm just meeting Destiny, but I've heard about you. I know you want to too. I don't want to leave you out. But knowing the mom I was before and knowing how I felt kind of being bullied in those meetings, I think I would have eventually have given in, put my son in whatever class they said, and he would have been in the back of the classroom, still struggling, still getting suspended, still getting written up as a bad kid, and not being able to live his full potential. And my other kiddo probably would have been like, hey, GD, I don't want to be here anymore. And that's what it would have been. She would have been depressed, and they wouldn't be the kids they are now, flourishing. So that's a little bit about homeschooling.
I love it.
Have questions, put it in chat.
I love it. I love it. And just to let you guys know what to expect, we're going to go to, for the next 15 minutes, right? We're going to talk with the panelists, and then we're going to turn to the audience, because we have a large audience. I know you got questions. So be thinking about your questions. Be ready to raise your hand. Lady J is organizing her thoughts now. I can already tell. I see her eyes, and we're going to pull those questions out. So Lady J, be reviewing those questions. When we come back to you, Cori, I would love to hear about what does anxiety in children look like? Because we often know what it looks like in adults. You see somebody chain smoking a cigarette, maybe that's anxiety. But what does it look like in children? I'm gonna come back to you on that one, Cori. Going to Maria, autism in Black. Maria, tell me this. When it comes to autism, if you don't mind describing, what does culturally competent autism look like, right? In your experience, what are some key components, right? Because I don't even hear a lot of Black people talking about autism. And even if they're talking about ADHD, like, no, we can't do ADHD. Let me get Black for a second, y'all. But hey, we can't let them, profile our kids. We can't let our kids railroad our kids, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do this. And no, not our kids, right? And no, that's for the man, that's for them other people. There's so much fear, emotion, stress. I've had to navigate this path and essentially pick up books and just discover so much about this topic to figure out what it means for me and my family. Tell me, Maria, what does culturally competent autism advocacy look like?
That is a very large question. But one, I want to thank Cheryl for talking about the foundational work that we're doing with Autism in Black. So I appreciate that. And to your question, that's the reason why Autism in Black was created, because not a lot of people are talking about what it's like for us. The representation of what autism looks like is a white male.
Yep.
The DSM, that book I talked about, the characteristics and the symptomology and how we diagnose are based off of white males. That's why there are high rates of misdiagnosis for our children. That's why when we're going into these offices to get our children diagnosed, those evaluations that have built-in biases are working against us. So when we're going in and seeing our healthcare professionals who are more than likely who do not look like us, because when we're talking about percentages, we're talking about 4% or less. So when you go in there and you have a 96% chance of having a non-Black healthcare professional, and they are using a evaluation that was not created for Black people, that leads to misdiagnosis, that leads to Black kids constantly getting pushed into a behavioral diagnosis, that leads to, autism is not a Black people thing. Don't come over here with that talk. That's not for us, but it is, So when I think of one, I like to use culturally responsive or cultural humility as the terms. I do not believe that anybody is competent in anybody's culture. I am a 40-year-old Black woman, and I do not know all things about all Black women. I'll never be competent on Black women. But I can be culturally
Amen.
responsive, right?
From a brother who's been trying. I'm like, it's hard, y'all.
So I like to tweak the words, and there's a big movement as well to not use competent anymore when we're talking about culturally responsiveness, because we don't want people to think that they're ever going to be competent. People can think that they take one class, get a paper certificate, and now I know everything about y'all, and that's that. But that's not the case. So one, it's approach about that emphasizes understanding, right, and respecting and integrating cultural backgrounds, values, and the belief systems all into one, but also understanding that you have to address those unique challenges, the systemic barriers that we face, especially when we're talking about those disparities in access to diagnosis, treatment, support services. So in a very just laid it out there to grasp terminology, that is what we're looking at when we're talking about culturally responsive autism advocacy. If I am not a Black person and I am advocating for Black children, I have to understand that there are that we walk this walk differently. As a Black woman who is walking this walk as an autistic individual, how I experience life and how a white 40-year-old autistic woman experiences life is completely different. Not only do I have my diagnosis, but people see my Blackness before they can even get to my disability. So I have to deal with that first. I have to deal with the fact that you already see me as an angry Black woman before I can even say hi or anything else, right? You already have whatever kind of biases in your mind before I can even talk about I have a disability. And that is called that intersectionality piece of it. So to be culturally responsive in autism advocacy and disability advocacy overall, you have to understand that intersectionality piece.
Thank you for sharing that, because it actually confirms what I've seen. And it's almost somewhat of a dismissive culture when you know who you are, you know who your child is. As parents, we know our children. I like how Cheryl was talking about what shows up in the IEP. We know what our children are good at. We know what they struggle with. We got to have that positive language in there. But I like what Maria's saying is that, they see us from 100 yards away and they're going to see brown, they're going to see Black, they're going to see whatever they see, and they will dismiss and not give us the opportunity to be a holistic person. So that's a very, very good thing. So thank you for sharing that, because what's the term? Culturally responsive. And that's, essentially is saying, whoa, let's normalize, let's, what they said, level the playing field and give this person, this parent, this child an opportunity. As they say, they categorize our children. They say, oh, he's defiant, or he's this and he's that. I'm like, whoa. He's a 12-year-old, he's an 8-year-old, he's a 5-year-old. And it's that defensive nature that I've seen that parents have to be hard to fight for. Nice word, advocate for their children, especially when we know people are categorizing, putting us and our children in a box that we and our children do not belong in. Thank you for that, Maria, because it really opened my eyes. What I want to do is step in, Cheryl, into the messy middle. So we kind of talked about what it is and whatever. Let's just talk about ugly stuff, right? The messy middle. And what we want to talk about is, for people who are new to this topic, I'm loving the chat, because in the chat, people are saying, this happened to me. This happened to me. What about this? What about this? For the people who are kind of new to this topic, like let's say they're neo like me, what are some of the things that we say? So let's talk about race and neurodiversity.
Okay.
What are some challenges and opportunity, and how does race and neurodiversity intersect? Can you give us some things that you've seen, how maybe, children or adults have not been afforded that opportunity to be human, to essentially, let's talk about race and neurodiversity. Okay. Tell us some of the messy middles of the things that you've seen that maybe we as parents, as advocates, should look out for to protect our children.
Well, one of the things I'm going to do is shameless plug. You probably can't see it, but I was a contributor to a book called Parenting at the Intersection, Raising Neurodivergent Children of Color. And one of the authors is actually here with us today. I think Priya is here. And this book is about the messy. right? It's about the experiences that we as Black parents, and I'm going to say it from a perspective of parents, because the messiness is why I do what I do, right? My son had a disability growing up that required speech and language therapy services. And while meeting with the speech pathologist who was trying to cancel his speech services, even though he still needed them, I mean, he still was not articulating. He still did not know, all the sounds associated with his letters. And she said to me, well, I want to cancel services because I think that you're just speaking Black English to him at home. And that's why he can't speak. So, as you can imagine, that was a racial insult. I was angry. I was mad. I wanted to jump across the table and strangle her, but I didn't want to go to jail. I was going to watch the kids. I don't look good in orange. But for me, that injury, that intersection that was put in my face like that, is part of the ugly. And I chose to use that anger, that hurt, that pain to learn every single thing I could about special education advocacy, IDA laws, Section 504. What I learned everything because I felt like after I got done with her, and I did handle her, I felt like if I can be treated like that as a Black woman who has a master's degree, and they knew that, who was in post-grad school, if they could say that to me and use my Blackness as a weapon against my child's neurodivergent, imagine what they're doing to other families. Imagine what they're doing to people that don't have that personality to say, I'm going to get you. Imagine what they're doing to parents that don't have the ability to articulate like I do, right? Imagine. And I couldn't sit with it. So I have spent the last, I'm the oldest one of the group, the last 20 years fighting this, and it's been a hard fight. It's been a hard fight to get to some degree the Black community to recognize, yes, disabilities are real, but they don't have to define us in a negative way. We need to learn how to use the resources, the laws, the money that's out there to make sure our kids get what they're supposed to get, just like the white families are doing, so that they can be successful in their differences, right?
I love it.
That's what we have to do. We have to do that. So
I'll tell you why I love it. It's because I often use this phrase. I'm like, hey, we have experienced so much as a people. You mean to tell me that there's insurance money that can connect to mental health, that can connect to the support service, that we need to heal from some of the things that we've seen and experienced? That's just one path, right?
Right.
I love. I'm going to come back to you, Cheryl, but thank you for opening that door to the messy middle. I want to go to Destiny next. And Destiny, I'm going to give you a chance to choose these 1 or 2 questions. We've just, Cheryl, opened the door to Black perspectives on learning disabilities and mental health. But it's also, she opened a door to advocating while Black. Mm-hmm. Destiny, do you mind sharing with us some of the things that you've seen, the messy middle, on advocating while Black, or certain Black perspectives on learning disabilities and mental health that makes this topic messy or hard to navigate?
So Cheryl and Maria are very familiar with my story. So I entered into advocacy when, like I said, my son was undiagnosed and he entered into the public school system. What I haven't talked about on here yet is that we came back from Christmas break in January, and within 2 weeks, he was suspended 3 times. The 4th suspension would have sent us to the board to determine if he was even allowed to remain in the school. Mm. And during this time, it was at school for less than 30 minutes. They called us, he's suspended. Returns back after the suspensions, he's suspended. Return back after the suspensions, he's suspended. So I, of course, was in a crisis, in panic. And at this point, after going back and forth with them, I was in burnout. Didn't know I was autistic yet, didn't know what was going on. And so I myself we lived on a military base, we're a military family, couldn't leave the military base to go to my house because they're going to call me. Every time my phone rings, I'm jumping, I'm having panic attacks. So this is where we were. And that's when my husband, the wonderful Black man that he is, he stepped in. I always point that out. And he literally was like, I'm going to the board. He was like, they're not putting my son out because he's Black. And the result of that was all of a sudden everyone's calling me because my husband is in the military. We are in a predominantly white location. We are a handful of Black individuals. He is an officer. Now we don't want to seem racist. We don't want to offend the military. And so now I have the instructional coach calling me, the principal calling me, the special education director calling me. You wouldn't even do an assessment for him. But now you want to call my phone. Get off my phone. So when we talk about that advocacy piece and advocating while Black, the number one thing they tried to throw in our face was that my son was oppositional defiant disorder. And I will always die on this hill. I do not like that diagnosis, and I wish it did not exist. That is my opinion, personally and professionally. Because when you look at the diagnosis, it literally is saying disobeys rules, does not comply with directives and requests from adults. And me being a mental health professional, you're sitting in my face telling me you have so much experience in the school atmosphere. And I'm sitting in your face telling you I'm an actual mental health professional. And this is not what my son has. And so when you are that Black person in the room sitting across all white faces, and my husband being in the military, he couldn't be there all the time for the meetings, right? So it was predominantly on me. You feel judged for everything. You feel like you're not a professional. You feel like your child is doing all these wrong things and you don't know how to help him and you don't know how to support him. You feel like a failure as a parent. And then you feel like because you're Black, they view you as less than, right? Even though you have in my case, I had the mental health experience. And so it goes back to what, Maria said. You have all of these credentials and, people are still looking at you like this. So what about those families that don't have those credentials, that don't have that background, that don't have that education? And so I have a mix of clients from Hispanic to Black to white to Middle Eastern that I help advocate for. Mm-hmm. And when I get in that room and after I've ghost wrote these letters and things like that, and I get in that IEP room, you can hear a pin drop because they're like, oh, wow. And I even had a fellow mental health professional in the meeting who she had written these very basic social emotional goals. And I used to approve treatment goals for mental health for insurances to approve to pay for the service. So I know how they're supposed to be written. And I questioned her goals. Like, I was just like, can you just give me a little bit more explanation? Because this was something I knew the child had already worked on. And she was white and I was Black. And so she was just like, well, like the goal says. So I said, okay, let me sit up a little straighter. Because you don't know my background, right? I'm there to support this family. I haven't gave you my whole spiel. I said, okay, so mental health professional here, been in the field almost 15 years, certified trauma therapist for children. So the goal says whole tone shift, right? Now she's, so I was talking about this and that and da-da-da and blah, blah, blah. And like, she's giving more explanation and understanding. But just like I stepped into the room and was very respectful of you, you should have done the same. So when you're advocating while Black and you are trying to keep your mental health in check, like Cheryl said, you're trying not to come across the table. Right. In my son's meeting, I literally told him, I said, I took a deep breath and my husband was like, I'm very proud of you. I took a deep breath and I said, you have one more time to tell me my son is oppositional defiant. And I left it at that. And they could interpret that how they felt. You interpret what one more time means. It could either mean these hands or it could mean I'm going to the director. You interpret. So that's the type of person I am. And so, like Cheryl said, we have a lot of strong personalities right now on here between Maria and Cori seems a little more toned down than me and Cheryl and Maria. I'm not sure. So imagine those families that don't have those personalities, that are not willing to have that approach, which is fine because that's not everybody's personality. Exactly. And then being told what they have to do for their Black child and feeling already less than. They're going to just let them do what they do, but it's not because they don't want better. Sometimes it's because they don't know better and they just feel like they can't.
OMG. Thank you, Destiny, for, ripping the plastic off, as the lady would say. I think Cori from the South Side, so I think, she let people know they can get them hands too, right? Right? She ready, right? But, this is so real, right? Because as I tell people before, we did a podcast called Micro Schools, and then we were talking about, kids are 10, whatever, at home. And it was complicated. Not everybody can do homeschooling. But when people have the audacity to be, I call them flirting with disrespect when it comes to your child, it makes you want to holler, right? Because you know who your child is, and you know your child is not getting what the child needs. And you know, all they got to do is just give 1% over here to give your child what they need, and they're not willing to do it. It makes you want to holler. Cori, let's talk about navigating neurodiversity and mental health. Earlier, I wanted to hear about what anxiety looks like in children. Do you mind sharing with us, your perspective on navigating neurodiversity and mental health when it comes to a topic like anxiety in children? It's not even something that we understand. What advice do you have for observing that topic? Because it seems like you took the journey. You took the journey with your child to figure this out and begin to advocate and understand what it meant for him. Tell us about anxiety in children.
Yeah, first I would like to say I am not a mental health professional. You have two on the panel, but I can only speak from my perspective. So I do want to say, how did we get to that diagnosis? So early on, we started the whole IEP special ed process when he was in preschool. He had I'm just going to call it a racist teacher. The teacher actually pulled me to the side and said, the first thing was, your son is disrespectful. And she would say things like, he doesn't listen. And he would come home and say, and I'm going to say, Miss Lawson, she told him that he couldn't read and he couldn't write. And he wrote her a note saying, Miss Lawson is mean. She said it was disrespectful. He asked to be called Mr. Fonville one time because we were at home teaching him about, calling people Mr. and Miss. She was like, that's disrespectful. And so me and my husband, we used to live in the hood. So yeah, I can't throw down Destiny if I need to. I was crying, but I was also bucking in the meetings as well. But me and my husband, we lived in the hood at the time. We were definitely paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes not even that. But we got our little money together and moved him into the better neighborhood so he could go to the better school to have more resources. In the first year we were there, had a great experience. They still put him in a collaborative classroom. There was a teacher aide, but he was thriving. But then he went to a summer program, and all of a sudden he's biting kids. He's screaming. We keep losing him. He won't transition. Transition was a big thing. And so again, I'm a very, active parent. I was like, okay, we're correcting him at home. And I was like, dang, he's always on punishment. He's only, in kindergarten, first grade. And so I said, let me go up in here. So I was that parent. I'm coming into the classroom. Let me sit. And I would sit there and I would notice that my child would be doing work and say he was writing a letter A or, writing cat. And if cat didn't look perfect and the teacher said it's time to move a circle time, he don't want to move a circle time. He want to make sure cat looks right. He wants to, have a discussion with you about something at a higher level. He wants to do all these other things that he's not able to do in class because as a class of 35 kids, it was time to move on to the next thing. Or the teacher would spend a lot of time helping the kids who couldn't read. And they would tell me, we're not worried about his education. He's just disruptive, right? But what I saw as the parent is, he would finish his work and then he would look around, there'd be nothing else to do. And so then he's playing, he's fiddling, he's singing, he's doing whatever. And of course it is disruptive to the other students, but it would stress him out. And then they said, well, we think he's autistic. Now, I don't know if my son's autistic. I'm not one of those parents that's closed off to it again. We're going through testing again. But I said, all right, I'm going to take him to the doctor. I'm going to take him to a professional. And we did. And what they found was he was a perfectionist, so much so that he had severe anxiety about things not being perfect. He was that kid that had to line up the cars, which is also, I guess, a symptom of autism. They're always lining up things and putting things in categories. Yep. And if you move that car, he's going to set it off. And so that's what it looked like for him. It was I'm going to put quotes on things. It was disruptive behavior. It was just a lot of not being able to regulate his emotions when things weren't absolutely perfect. And now he's 12. And we still have moments where I'm like, dude, it's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be, just that way. And we can talk through it. But back then he would just scream and holler, and he could not be kind of talked off of that ledge. And the school just didn't have the time or the resources to support him. Well, they said they did, because now I know from Cheryl that they could have, but they chose not to. And so that's when, come get your kid, take him home happened. all the time. Or they would, like I said, they would lose him. Where's my child? Oh, we don't know, because he's now walked off and nobody paid attention to him because nobody wanted to deal with him. And it was very frustrating as a parent. But again, I don't want you guys to think that you have to be okay with that, because now I know better. I would do better now. But that's what anxiety looked like for him. And it looks like it has gotten better now that he's gotten some resources and support.
Thank you. Thank you for showing us that perspective of anxiety in children perfectionism. Well, we made it to 15 after the hour, and what I promise is that we're going to transition to the audience. So, but what I want to do for the speakers is be thinking about the call to action, right? Here at Soul Thursdays, we'd like to build awareness, but you can't stop there, right? Because you can sit on the front pulpit all day, but you'll never, amen, you'll never testify, right? We want to focus on the call to action and what we can do as parents, as advocates, as people who really understand that, hey, it may not be your turn, but if it ever happens to you, your cousin, your family, them, then you need to understand this. So Lady J, KD, talk to me. I mean, I've seen the chat just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling like a stock ticker. I can't keep up, but I'm pretty sure we've had some awesome questions. And now is a good time for you to raise your hand. I don't know how to do it. Just go for the reaction. Raise your hand. We'll get you unmuted. We'll find your message in the chat. But those who really got some good questions, Lady J, what do you got for us? What questions have you seen?
I have a lot. I'm not even sure how to. One question came up from Tomiko. What does on the spectrum mean, and how can I learn more about it? So there were some definition questions.
So that's a great question to get started. And Lady J, as you go through the questions, just kind of look at, based on the conversation tonight, what you think should be a question we can boil to the top. And if you're, if Lady J doesn't get you a question, raise your hand or something like that, or put in the chat to say, hey, don't forget about my question, and we'll get to that. Let's go to the panelists. What does on the spectrum mean?
I answered that one for her. It is just a synonym for autism spectrum disorder. That is the clinical name that you may hear when going to a healthcare professional. And understand that medical diagnosis and school categorization are two different things. We haven't talked about that, but a medical diagnosis by a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a developmental pediatrician, a therapist, medical diagnosis is completely different than a school categorization done by the school psychologist.
Yeah, don't let them school people diagnose your child. Keep going.
Well, they will let you know that
I
they
told
don't
y'all I will get triggered. Keep going.
They will tell you they don't diagnose, they categorize. And understand that your child can have a medical diagnosis and not have that school categorization. My son is autistic. He has a medical diagnosis. That diagnosis is not on his IEP. That is not why he qualifies for special education services. Have I made sure that his IEP protects him in all aspects of who he is? Yes, but understand that just because your child has a medical diagnosis does not mean they will have the school categorization. But autism spectrum disorder is the entire clinical name. The category in school is autism. And of course, you can learn more about that by going to autisminblack.org or joining us at the 4th annual Autism in Black virtual conference happening April 19th through the 21st.
Hey, make sure y'all drop in the chat where people can sign up and register for that, because they definitely want to go next. That's a call to action. So, Lady J, we got two hands up, Torian and Candy. Do you have their questions?
No, those are new questions.
Okay, so let's see here. We want to make sure that people who type their questions get a chance to. So, Lady J, you have a question for us?
Yes. ACOB asked several questions, but this was the first one. He says, can any of the panelists speak on their perspective of effectiveness of ABA therapy in the classroom learning environment? And Maria Davis says she was up for it if it made it to the
Yes.
Can you tell us what ABA therapy is, though? For the
ABA is applied behavioral analysis. And so you may see a lot of talk about ABA if you look into the autism world, autism advocacy world. You may see a lot of people have a dislike towards ABA because of the harm that it has done towards autistic individuals, and rightfully so, right? However, when talking about ABA and Black people, it's completely different for us because we know that harm can come from any healthcare professional when it comes to us.
Right.
So ABA is a type of therapy that is going to help with behaviors at the most, let's general of terms, behaviors. So, you may be recommended for 20 to 40 hours. I always say that that is excessive. I don't think anybody should be having 40 hours of therapy in a week. A stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis, ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. You may have a RBT or a BCBA as your therapist, your ABA therapist. What I say for Black people is that we can't listen to that rhetoric, especially when a lot of that rhetoric is done by white people who do not understand what it's like to be Black. We have to understand that there are times where there is no other alternative but ABA. I have had clients who have stated that their children will be taken away from them if their child does not get ABA therapy. And this is something that is unique to us as a Black community. So we have to understand that when it comes to ABA, we have to then have protective measures to make sure that no harm is being done to our children. We have to make sure that the goals align with the culture of your home. If you don't feel like you should be forcing my child to make eye contact, make that be known with your therapist. Be vocal with the RBT or the BCBA. Let them know what you're okay with your child doing, what goals you would like to see with your child to make sure that no harm is done. Make sure you're always around. They may try to tell you not to be around. I don't play that. I'm going to always be around.
I don't play that.
Exactly. Unless we're talking about mental health therapists, then that's a whole nother HIPAA thing. But with ABA, you can be around. They cannot make you not be around your child. So you have to understand that when it comes to any kind of therapy for us, we have to put those measures in place, not just with ABA, with any kind of healthcare professional. We have to be hypervigilant. We have to advocate in a different way because we know that that harm can happen to us from any kind of healthcare professional. So I want us to not just think about that for ABA. And I think the rhetoric around why it's so focused on ABA is because that's the first time white people had to deal with somebody trying to change who they are. When us, it's been happening since, been here. So I think that's also why there's such a hard push of no ABA, because they've never had to deal with somebody saying, you can't be this way. You got to do something different, when we know the world for us is ABA. Right. Okay. Police officers can, try to have behavioral therapy with us, how we should walk, how we should talk, how we should show up. So we understand that it's just not in that form for us.
Awesome.
So that's why we have to think about it differently.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Maria. And what I'm going to do, Torin, thanks for being patient. I'm going to read Torin's question. And while I read Torin's question, who has his hand up, is that we're going to go to Candy and Lady J. Be looking for another question, because I've seen a lot of questions. I'm going to read Torin's question, and Lady J, be scrolling through the chat looking for other questions. And if you want your question to be read, make sure you put in the chat now. Be like, hey, Lady J, don't forget me, Toria. My son is in kinder this year. It's been rough. They have provided every accommodation for him. He is autistic and recently diagnosed with ADHD. He gets his work done very fast, according to the support school staff. Sometimes, though, he refuses, will run around and scream. I do not know why he does this. We visited a new school and they said autistic kids like my son get left behind to fend for themselves because they are off the charts, smart, but lack social skills. Therefore, he should be placed in a cluster classroom. They think it will show in his adulthood about not being able to hold a conversation or keep a job. His current challenge is pragmatic skills. He loves to be around people. He just doesn't know how to interact or do neurotypical games. So he plays by himself unless it's something he understands. Any thoughts? Torian came to talk tonight. I love vulnerability. Thank you, Torian. I'd like to remind you guys, I'm not a licensed therapist. We got a couple on here, but this is discussion. It's all about awareness and building. If you essentially desire a personal therapist, the ladies tonight are going to leave in the chat where you can. But let's talk about Torian's conversation in general. Let's say, ladies, you're dealing with a scenario like this, which seems very specific. Any thoughts or advice for Torian?
I would like to take this one for the start because I experienced this myself when my child was in kindergarten, and the addressing of the pragmatics. And again, he is more verbal, it sounds like, than your child currently is. But whenever they start talking about behaviors, my first thing is they're always like, as parents, sometimes we don't know because we're not in the classroom. We can't see. Sometimes post-COVID, we're in a post-COVID world now. So it's not as easy when people say, just go in the classroom, just go see them, just go observe them, just go do this. Some schools are not allowing that. Some schools are only allowing you to observe for 10 minutes at a time. And then they have to be prepped. You come in, and then it's not the same environment he's usually in. Either way, first of all, the person that talked to you about the social skills and the way in which he communicates and him not being able to hold a job and this or that, out of line, out of place. Okay? Because they're putting a cap on what your child is capable of doing.
Doing too much.
So that's one.
Yeah.
The second thing is when they're saying that sometimes he's doing his work, he's speeding through, he's getting the work done. And then other times he's running around the room and he's moving around. It sounds like he's getting overwhelmed or overstimulated or in the midst of almost burning out of like, I'm doing so much work, I'm doing so many things and I need a break. Mm-hmm. So if your child is on an IEP, and if that part was stated, that's my ADHD. So I missed that because I got so worked up with the other things being said. If your child is on an IEP, I always recommend looking at breaks, looking at having scheduled breaks into his day so that he gets the time to decompress. If they have sensory rooms, I mean actual sensory rooms with sensory swings, set up, an OT room, things like that to incorporate. When we're talking about pragmatics, that is something that can be assessed by the speech language pathologist, and there can be supports and goals and services put into the IEP for that. When we're talking about social skills, as Maria said, I default to the parent on your view and your perspective of what social skills look like for your child. For my child, they will not be maintaining eye contact. That is my personal opinion. I cannot do it as an adult. If you all haven't noticed, I've been wiggling in my chair. I've been looking around. I've been focusing on the chat because that's easier for me. I can't maintain eye contact. So today we did his IEP and I was like, with this new speech pathologist, I was like, yeah, go ahead and take that out, Playboy. So when you're talking about the pragmatics, though, and talking about that social interaction and engagement in social situations and classroom settings, how I have it set up for my son is we focus on that perspective taking. We focus on conversations. We focus on your special interest is Pokemon. But guess what, buddy? Somebody may not want to talk about Pokemon. So you have a choice. You can keep talking about Pokemon and they're going to go talk about something else, or you can join them in what they want to talk about. Versus the neurotypical way. So neurotypical is when we're talking about that typical societal standards and views of maintaining eye contact, following adult directives and requests, no matter what the comply is, regardless of safety. Right. So I have that in there because I don't want them just sitting there and telling him, when your friend says they want to do this, you have to go do that. Because now you're teaching blind compliance, my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, and that as a certified trauma therapist who's worked with children who have been abused, that is dangerous. There. So that's my perspective on that, is looking at them getting pragmatic goals put in there, services with the speech language pathologist. You can specifically request a pragmatics assessment from the speech and language pathologist to address that social piece. And then looking at the data. When is he getting up and running around and screaming? Is it certain subjects? Is it certain tasks? Is it when certain requests are made? Okay, so how do we support him in that regard? And now I'm gonna jump off my soapbox and let the other lady speak.
Y'all got Destiny talking, y'all, and y'all know she will nuck and buck, so y'all better leave this alone. So okay, so Candy has her hands up. Candy, we're gonna give you a chance to mute yourself, and I'm gonna look at my timer. So being unmuted is a privilege. So we're gonna give you let's see, 60 seconds to ask your question. What's up, Candy?
Yeah, I only need 45. Thank you so much. Thanks for hosting, and thank you to this wonderful panel for sharing this wealth of knowledge with us. The struggle is real. I reside in a red state. Okay, I'm in Texas. I have an IEP.
Outside.
Yeah. I have an IEP coming up April 17th for a 6-year-old autistic ADHD boy, first grade. I have a current attorney, but I think she's sitting on both sides of the table because we live in a predominantly white neighborhood and go to like one of the most prestigious schools in the county, in the city. My question is, I believe that I'm going to have to go due process after declining and not assigning or agreeing with things on the IEP. If I have to file due process and my attorney is dragging her feet and I cannot afford to invest in another attorney, is it okay to file due process on your own, just based on your experiences and what you've seen? And if I lose a due process, is it why, like, would I have the opportunity to appeal? I think my question is, can I file my own due process and complaints? And if I lose, can I? Okay.
Yes. So, yes, I believe Texas is, all states, parents can file due processes. I also, both Destiny and I, we do advocacy in Texas. And Texas is very different and unique. For many reasons. You have certain parts of Texas where the government, the U.S. Department of Education, is coming and take over because they're not doing the right thing. And then you have some other parts of Texas that they are trying to do the right thing. But my recommendation is, if you have an attorney and you're paying money for her and she's not working, immediately fire her and find another attorney or advocate. Yes, you can file your due process yourself. And there are actually some resources, videos, books that you can read to kind of help you go through the process. Your state also is required to have a list of free and reduced attorneys that will represent you in sped ed. You may have to go to the Department of Education website and get that list to find out who you may be able to hire at a discounted rate. Texas, you have a really good legal aid department. What do you call them? Legal aid services out there. I've actually worked with some of the people that work in some of the legal aids, and they do some pretty good stuff there. So there are a lot of resources in Texas. In fact, there's probably more special education attorneys in Texas than there are in most states. So yes, and you can even try mediation. That might be something that works out for you instead of going straight to due process. And you should be able to learn about that also at the website, or you can reach out to me and I can help you look at that as an option for mediation.
Definitely reach out to Cheryl, because it's rare to find somebody who's not in Texas that, know the knowledge and can share with you, and they keep it real. So definitely reach out. We're going to go to Geraldine and Brittany since they raised their hand. Lady J, let me know if you see any burning questions in the chat, because the chat has been hot tonight. And, every time we do a Neurodivergent show, the chat is always hot. OMG, it scrolls like a ticket. It tickles me, right? But I love it. I love it. I love it. So, Geraldine, you got 60 seconds. What's your question? You got to get yourself unmuted. We're going to go to Brittany, Gerald, if you're not ready. All right, let's go to Brittany. Brittany, you ready?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a quick question. So I recently had an updated IP meeting with my school. I'm very unsatisfied with them, but after my advocate reviewed it, she feels like my daughter has something called, she said like table dyslexia. And during the meeting, they act like they did not hear it at all. I'm a physician assistant. My husband's a physician assistant. Like I know what I'm doing. So I have an attorney, and the attorney, we're going to file for mediation, because I asked for her to get oral Wilson a reading program because we noticed she was reading really well in kindergarten and then started to fall behind because she has a very good memory. So what I'm trying to find out is in the state of New Jersey, which, I work in New York and I know more about the school systems in New York because I'm originally from New York. I heard you cannot take schools to court in New Jersey. You have to go through mediation. So I'm just trying to find out more information because I'm very dissatisfied with the school. We live in a very conservative part of Bergen County, even though Bergen County is very diverse. Yeah. Where I live is not. We moved here because they do have good schools, but if your kids have any learning disabilities, they're horrible because they're small towns. So the small towns, I've learned that if your kids have issues with school, it's better to live in a bigger town because they will give you more access. And, my advocate has said that she's never seen this. Like she drilled on them and they act like they don't hear her. So she even told me, she's like, you have to speak to your attorney. Because at this point, she's telling them she has table dyslexia and they passed over it like nothing. I asked for her to have an intervention for the summer because I told them she's not going to summer school because it was a complete waste of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I've never heard that term before. Hopefully somebody else has. So anybody want to take a stab at that? It seems like she's at her wit's end. She's, navigating the system in an environment she doesn't like. It seems like nobody's listening to her. Who wants to take a stab at it? Go ahead, Cheryl.
I can just address one thing, and I actually dropped the link in there. There is absolutely no regulatory language that requires you to go through mediation before you file a due process. That whoever told you that was wrong, because that's a federal law. In New Jersey, even though I love Jersey, they don't have the ability to say, "Oh, we're going to change the federal rules." So that's just incorrect. I just wanted to clear that up. I've never heard of table dyslexia before. So I can't speak to that. I've never heard of that.
So definitely I would say follow up with Cheryl. That way you guys can have a conversation. And Cheryl, drop in the chat your email address so they can email you. It seems like that's a one-on-one conversation. And if you don't support New Jersey, maybe you can direct them to someone. So
my family's from Jersey, so they get free services from me all the time up there.
Awesome. We got 2 hands up, and let you guys know what the next. So we're going to give each speaker a chance to wrap up, and they're going to talk about next steps, right? They're going to talk about the call to action, not just talking about it, but being about it. What should we be doing as parents, as educators, as advocates for these Black and brown children who we know are awesome people, awesome humans, but are just not getting that fair opportunity. So we're going to give them a chance to wrap up. And we got Brittany's hand up. We got Karen's hand up. And Lady J, once again, let me know if you got anything burning in the chat. If Lady J missed you, put in the chat to say, hey, Lady J, don't forget about me. So you got 60 seconds, Brittany, and up next, Karen. And then what we're going to do is give each speaker to do a round robin and be thinking about the things you want to leave with us. Your upcoming conference, the things that you didn't get to say that you definitely want us to walk away with tonight. Brittany, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and thank you for this space. It's been wonderful. This is my first time. I just wanted to start off and just give some background history as to what has happened with me. My daughter was in first grade and a threat assessment was rolled up against her. They were really trying to steer her in a way of a diagnosis, but without the professional person to actually give the diagnosis. And I was advocating for her. I said, absolutely, if she needs the services. But a threat assessment was put on her. She was 6 years old. And I fought and I won against the school board. So I spoke to them and I told them that I had a delay in care because of how they treated her and how they didn't have de-escalation tactics. And I know we speak about IEPs, but I think with the suspensions and everything like that, like de-escalation tactics has not been taught. And maybe
if that's something geared towards IEP. So there's been a delay. I haven't done an IEP. She's now in the 5th grade and she's struggling. My question is, being that she's in a private school, how should I go about getting an IEP done? I did do some brief research and it said that I have to go to the school district myself, but the private school is saying they assist with it. Is there any differences or barriers that I should be aware of?
Thanks for that question, Brittany. And what it reminds me is that we've been moving fast tonight and we didn't get a chance to talk about the holistic process. So Cheryl, I think Cheryl would probably be the best person, is that when it comes to special education, when it comes to, needs, when it comes to 504s, let's talk about the things such as, the 401, the IEPs, the advocate, what are the pieces and what are the options? Because one of the things Brittany has said, and I just kind of cringe a little bit because I only heard this, that private school can be unique when it comes to these things. Anybody want to kind of just talk to Brittany about what the options, what the path are, if there's a fork in the road, or what are some things that she should be considering? Go ahead, Destiny. What's on your mind?
Yeah.
You saw me click the unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
You take that.
I saw you shift a little bit.
So one of the first things I always say, and I put this in the chat, whenever we're looking at good schools or private schools or charter schools, you really need to look at their experience with special education, children with disabilities, children with learning disabilities, and Black or Brown children. I say this because I've had several clients of all races come to me for consultations after placing their child into a private or charter school that was very good, does very well, but they were not familiar with working with children with disabilities. And they can sometimes have a stereotyped approach or view of what it's supposed to look like. So if your child is doing the things that they consider like not okay, whatever that definition is for them, that can impact the child's success in that setting. So I want to give that disclaimer first. When we're talking about private schools and charter schools and looking at IEPs, because I recently had a situation where I had to advocate for a client in New Jersey about this. I always recommend you look at first, who is the funding source of that school and what their special education policy is. Because when you start talking about private and charter schools, you get away from the public school setting, right? So we know in the public school setting, when we start talking about IDEA and special education, it's even though it's not followed, it's not always complied with, it's not always even understood by the school staff. You can go right to IDEA and look at the laws. And what it says is what it says. And that's what applies. When you start getting into private schools and charter schools, you have to look at what is their policy on special education. Some private schools and charter schools don't receive public funding from IDEA. And so they do a version of IEPs, which means that they don't do your standard IEP, but they'll say, we can provide accommodations or we can provide supports for your child. We can accommodate their needs, but they don't have that standard plan and that standard process that they follow. Then you have some, like I have a client right now in a charter school, and that charter school is funded through a university. And that university specifically uses IDEA laws and language when referring to their special education. So when you're looking at this private school, make sure that you go to their website, you find out who runs their special education, who is in charge of that, how they get their funding, and the process they go through. I know that's a lot. But I'm trying to help you be preemptive in protecting your baby before you place your baby in this school thinking that it is the right setting and not being able to advocate successfully on their behalf.
Wow. I mean, drop the mic on that one. And it's so funny because at private school, we often think, oh, private school, that's going to be the silver bullet, it's going to be the win. But I like the way you described it because I know I'd heard that private school was different, but now you kind of helped me really visualize it. Where does the money come from?
Right.
And based on where the money come from, because one thing I know is in public school, as soon as you get that paperwork, they start paying you attention and acting like they're your best friend. And without the paperwork, they just ignore you, right? So, but private school obviously is different. So last question, we're going to do round robin with the speakers. So be thinking about what you guys want to leave as encouragement, as thoughts, as next steps for the audience. So we're going to go to Karen. Hey, Karen, can you hear us?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. This has been a great conversation, and I'm going to try to be short. So my son was misdiagnosed with ODD. COVID hit. He missed kindergarten. I put him in a private school thinking, okay, maybe he needs small group. Finally moved him over to public school. And that's when I was like, I want him tested. He got tested. He has, autism level 1. Then I did the medical autism 2. So this is his second year in school, public school, and it has been hell. It's just been hell. I am a single mother, and at the beginning of this year, they put him in a redirection unit. That traumatized him. I didn't know where else to do. I put him in ABA because I'm like, I don't know what else to do. And I took him out of school. Now he's back in public school twice a week. Now they want to put him in FLS, functional living skills. They had 3 people come from the district to observe him. And so by the end of their observation, the SPED teacher called me and she was like, hey, we think it'd be best. He is in 3rd grade. So of course we have started testing. And I know a big part of it is because they don't want him to be part of his scores because he's not in school but twice a week. When I go to this art meeting next week, what questions do I need to ask about putting him in the FLS? I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go.
Thank you, Karen, for sharing with us your journey. Anybody want to take a stab at that? It seems like she's at her wit's end. Mm-hmm. It seems like she's heavily invested. She's, it's so much going on. Anybody want to give some thoughts? And we definitely want somebody to follow up with Karen.
Right. I'll start some of it. And then I think, Maria, you might want to pop in to help with some advice around the autism. But as far as your ARD meeting, which for those who don't know, in Texas, they call IEP meeting ARD meetings instead. You want to request a copy of the evaluation or observation data. You said that they had 3 people come in and observe your child. You need to find out what that was about. You want to get the report. You want to see what information did you collect to say that my child needs to go in a more restrictive environment. You should ask them, that's the first thing for your meeting to ask. I want to see proof. I want to see evidence. And it should not just be, oh, well, the teacher said this. No, it needs to be some concrete data. It needs to be information based on assessments. You need to ask them, have you done a functional behavioral assessment yet? Have you looked at developing a behavioral intervention plan? Have you brought in the school psychologist maybe to help you work better with my child to get the best out of him? I would definitely ask for more supports, more services, more examination of what the behavior is or what the cause is for them to want to put him in a more restrictive environment. And I'll pass it to Maria after that.
Karen, I'm sorry that you're experiencing this. This is something that is extremely common, and I don't want you to feel like you're alone, and don't even feel good about not being alone in that experiences of having to experience that. What I really want to say is adultification. Adultification of our children happens so much, and adultification means that people are biased, inherently have biases that adultify our children, see them as older than they are. So what it's sounding like is they're not, again, culturally responsive. They're adultifying your son. They are not understanding characteristics of children and what children should be doing. A lot of times people who work in a school shouldn't work in a school. They think that the things that your children are doing, they shouldn't be doing. They're children. No child, no adult is 100% compliant, going to sit there and do whatever someone tells them to do. So go in there advocating for your baby and let them know that you're not with it. What is your data? What are you backing it up? What are you trying to say? Because it's sounding like they have skipped a lot of pieces and tried to adultify your child and push them out so they don't have to deal with your child. I have experienced that firsthand with my son starting in preschool. And I had to let people know that excuse my language, I wasn't with the shit. I'm not taking it. You're not going to do it. I'm not going to play that game. So let's redirect how we're going to face this. So you have to be aware of a lot of terminology to advocate for your child. Let them know that they're not going to adultify your child. Let them know that, hey, it seems like you guys are moving pretty fast and I am not understanding what's going on here. And we need to back up some of these steps, and don't feel alone in this process, because it can feel so lonely, especially when we're talking about dealing with that Black side of autism, or that Black side of ADHD, or the Black side of advocacy and advocating while Black. It can feel so lonely because other people are not talking about what their experience is. Also know that even if your child is at a school where people are looking like them, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, and that you're working in a system.
Child.
You're working in a system that is racist and biased, and I may not be able to do what I need to do for somebody that looks like me, because again, I may lose my job, or I may not be able to do what I need to do. So understand that even if the evaluator looks like me, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, and there's a lot of other things at play there. So that's what I'll leave you with here.
Awesome. Last question, Simone, we're going to follow with you. I want to give you guys a running show. We're like 8 to 10 minutes before wrapping up the show. This is what we're going to do. We're going to give each speaker a chance to wrap up and give your last thoughts. When you guys when you log off, a survey is going to pop up. Do fill out the survey. Tell us how you're doing, how you're feeling, recommendations for speakers. I'm going to have to get with this team here. Cheryl, we got to do a part 2, because I'm telling you, we going all time. We got to think about, let us know what you guys want to hear in part 2. I'm going to check with Cheryl, and we're going to think about how we want to approach that. But let's go ahead, Cheryl. We're going to go round robin. And Cheryl, we talked about a lot tonight. Give us your final thoughts for the audience and what you recommend, next steps as a part of not just talking about it, but being about it. What are the steps and the call to action that the audience need to know?
Wow, that's a big question. I think for me, the first thing, every person that has shown up for this event tonight, I want to give flowers and blessings to you all. Because by showing up to hear this important topic, you're letting us know that this work we're doing is important. A majority of the time, we are in white spaces and our voices aren't ignored or aren't respected in the level that you all are giving to us. So I just want to thank you all for being here and letting us know how important what we are saying is. The call to action is, do not give up on your child. Trust your mama gut or your daddy gut. Trust that instinct. If your child is coming home and they are telling you something that's going on at school with the teacher or with the peer, believe them, investigate it. I think my call to action to you all is research. We are here as resources. Like, Maria has a conference coming up. I do workshops, trainings also. We have a Facebook group. We do free presentations just so people can know information on our Facebook groups. We are here. Now that you have us, use us, right? And just never give up. And know that when you're advocating, you're not alone. Know that you are doing the right thing for your child, and know that, yes, it'll be hard, but on the other side of it, there are rewards.
Awesome. Up next, who wants to go next? Let us know your wrap-up thoughts.
I'll go. I'll do my wrap-up thoughts. I shared my story a bit tonight, and if I can leave you guys with anything, because it sounds like a lot of you are in the early stages of getting support, is you don't want to let other people limit your children. You don't want others to tell you what the potential of your child is. If I would have listened to those people telling me, basically put him in a room with some folk and close the door, and not worry about him, because I was like Destiny talked about earlier, he can't have a conversation with his peers. He's not doing eye contact. He's having emotional outbursts. Just throw him in this room and close the door. He would not be who he is now. He's just 12, about to enter high school. He got selected out of our whole city. Last year, he was the youngest person to get selected for a paid internship, working with kids older than him, telling them what to do. So I don't want you guys to think that this is the end. If your child is struggling now and is not typical, first of all, we got to throw that word out, but if they're not showing up typical, don't let the people tell you that they can't be a doctor, an engineer, or whatever. Because I'm telling you, when you advocate for your children, when you don't give up on them, anything is possible. And guys, look, I will say I do work with Maria and Cheryl, but if I would have had them with me back in the day, I would have been rumbling up in the meetings. And I've been to both of their conferences. They're absolutely fantastic. Now that I'm connected with Destiny, all right, like I said, I already know she about that life. Connect with these people, use these resources, because when I attended Maria's conference last year, I was blown away by the wealth of knowledge. When I went to Cheryl's conference last year, I was like, what is all this information that I never knew existed? If you've gone to these IEP meetings and just got a little handout, they say, oh, here's your rights, and you're too distraught to even read it, right? You're all overwhelmed. Get with these people, because they're the real deal. They will hold your hand as you try and help you and make sure your kid gets the resources they are entitled to get. Don't think these schools are doing you a favor. Your family is entitled to receive the services needed for your child. They are getting money for your child's disability, and they are not trickling it down to giving your child the resources that they are entitled to. So please do connect with these amazing panelists. If you're thinking about homeschooling, I'm here to support you as well. You can check me out on Instagram. But like I said, don't give up on your child. Don't give up on yourself.
Awesome. She says, unleash the mama bear and don't let nobody tell you nothing about your child. We're going to go with Maria, and then we got to end with Destiny, because I know she's ready to knock and buck, so I know she want to go last. Maria, what's your thoughts? Last thoughts, call to action for the audience.
I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't talk about emotions. So I think something we didn't touch on, and because people will tell you, be resilient. As Black people, we're supposed to be so resilient, but a lot of things that we go through is unfair and it doesn't feel good. Honor those emotions, acknowledge those emotions. If you're sad, say you're sad. If you're frustrated, if you are going through a grief process of your child getting their diagnosis, because as parents, we do think about how our child is going to be and who they're going to be. And that is a grief process. Honor that. Honor those emotions, because when you don't, it leads to other things that not only hinder your child, but you as well. So I want you to honor those emotions, right? I want you to feel those emotions, and I don't want you to have shame in the emotions that you feel. A lot of times people make parents feel ashamed of what they're feeling. And I don't like that. And I don't appreciate that. So I know that I am telling you all that because people don't tell us that, especially in the Black community. They have their own biases of how we're supposed to walk this walk. And I'm telling you, get rid of those thoughts. Think of something different.
Awesome. I love it. As she would say, it is totally okay to feel your feelings. This is hard. This is difficult. It's ugly. And what you feeling is real. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. Last up is Destiny. Then Lady J, we're going to talk a little bit, listen to some music, complete the survey before y'all log on. I'm going to play some music and videos for y'all who like to sing. So hang out, because, I got to, decompress after tonight, because, I can't go to sleep after all of this good word, right? So it's going to take a while. So listen to some music with me. Probably going to spend 15 minutes. I don't know, whatever y'all feeling. Destiny, what's your call to action, the final words you want for the audience?
Well, first, I want to say I love that you all got to see my personality shine. I am a very in-your-face person, but Cheryl is more in your face than me. Don't let her fool y'all. Don't let her fool y'all. I have two things. One is do your research. Please do your research. Even if your child receives a diagnosis from a professional, do your research. Maria really touched on this in that a lot of times there's a lot of misunderstanding. I truly believe had I not gone to a Black psychologist, clinical psychologist and educational psychologist, my son would have been misdiagnosed with ODD. I truly believe that. So do your research. Learn about the diagnosis, learn how they present, and specifically learn how they present in your child. That's one of your best tools to advocate for them. The second thing is, grieve, like Maria said, grieve what you grieve. You have these perceptions about yourself, your child, their future, what it's going to look like. Grieve. Don't let anyone shame you about that. But also understand that you have 4 neurodivergent Black women on this panel right now running businesses, running conferences. And notice I said businesses, plural. So your children being diagnosed with autism is not an end. It's not a death sentence. It is just another layer to figure out how to support them. And I always say, and this is the last thing, even though I said 2, is that I always tell Black families and Black parents, because we worry about that label. And I always say, unfortunately, you have to look at it. Do I want them labeled correctly or do I want them labeled bad? And always remember that when you don't get the correct diagnosis and you don't truly know what's going on with your child, they're going to default to labeling them bad.
Oh, that's real. Thank you, Destiny. OMG. She says, I really get it because, as Black folks, we don't want our kids to be labeled. But as Destiny say, they're going to label them one way or another. So if they're going to label them, I want to participate in that label.
Thank you for joining us at Southern Soul Livestream Talk Show. Join us weekly at soullivestream.com. If you're joining us live, we'll take a quick music break and then come back for discussion with the audience.